Mr. President.
The Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, in the year 1789, in the United States Senate, in a chamber not far from here, the Senate approved the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Excuse me. The Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The Second Amendment to the Constitution, an amendment which has been honored and debated and litigated over the entire history of the United States. Whatever the true intent of our founding fathers in writing that language, that brief sentence, I wonder if they could even imagine what we are dealing with today in the name of the right of people to keep and bear arms. Because you see, Mr. President, every day on average in America, 297 people are shot. Every day, 89 die. Every day in America. Last Saturday, I was with my wife in Chicago, having a cup of coffee and reading over the papers, listening to National Public Radio. And they reported the Roseburg, Oregon shooting at the community college. And they cited a statistic that I was not aware of. That shooting at that community college that killed 9 innocent people, that shooting was the 45th school shooting in America this year. 45. 45 shootings in schools. There were many other mass shootings in different places. But now, even schools, even students, even school children are not safe from the rampage of guns. I'm honored to represent the city of Chicago. It is a great city. I do my best to help it in every way I can. But I also have to be very candid and honest with you. So far, there have been 2,300 shootings in the city of Chicago this year. Where are all these guns coming from? Yesterday morning, I went to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in Chicago and sat down with the new director and asked him that question. Where are all these guns coming from? Why do we have more guns per capita in Chicago than in New York? Why is it that so many of these teenagers and kids, mobs and gangs, are armed to the teeth? Where are all these guns coming from? He said, Senator, the number one source of guns in the state of Illinois, crime guns that we've taken in the Commission of Crime and can trace, the number one source is Illinois. We have this phenomena where people go into a federal licensed arms dealer and purchase guns and use them in crime. But the bigger problem is they send in someone without a criminal record who can pass a background check, who buys guns and turns them over to drug gangs and thugs and criminals on the street. They call it gun trafficking. So the number one source of guns is trading guns within the state of Illinois, and these traffickers, these straw purchasers, who purchase a gun not for their own use, but to turn it over to a criminal or to sell it to a criminal. That's the number one source. What is the number two state supplying guns to the state of Illinois? Indiana, adjoining Illinois to the east. Specifically Lake County, Indiana, in the northwestern section of that state. Why do we get so many guns from Indiana into Illinois that are used in the commission of crime? Because of gun shows. Gun shows which occur on the weekends when people literally show up in Indiana, show some state identification, and without any background check, walk out with a gun. not just a gun, many times fill their trunks with guns and ammunition, drive across the border into Chicago, Cook County, go to the west side of town or down south in Englewood, pull up in an alley or maybe even on a curbside and have an open market selling these guns picked up at gun shows. The people who purchased these never went through a background check. 9 times out of 10, unless they're buying in a gun show from a federal dealer, it's just an arm's length transaction. However many guns you want to buy, no questions asked. You'd be disqualified if you went to a federal gun dealer for many of these people. They have a history of committing felonies and other acts that disqualify them. But the fact is today, that's the number 2 source of guns, Indiana. What's the number 3 source of guns, crime guns, in the city of Chicago? Mississippi. Mississippi. Why? Because their gun show requirements are even more lax than in the Midwest. It is an ongoing commerce of running those guns up the interstate, selling them into the city of Chicago. So what's happening? It's a dramatic increase in homicides across America. We are awash with guns. And sadly, many of them are in the hands of people who buy them to kill innocent people. There's been a spike in homicides this year, not just in Chicago, but in Milwaukee, St. Louis, Houston, Baltimore, New Orleans, and many other cities. The plain reality is we are now awash in guns in America, and it's far too easy for convicted criminals, felons, and unstable people to get their hands on a gun and to use it. When guns are everywhere and when it's easy for dangerous people to get them, it puts everyone at risk. Can you imagine for a second that any of those students heading into that community college in Oregon that morning had even an idea that they would face a gunman and some would die? The heartbreaking stories. One I remember hearing from a minister who talked about his daughter who survived because she appeared to be a bloody corpse and the gunman stepped over her. That father could hardly contain his emotions when he talked about dropping that girl off at school and living with the possibility that she would have died there, and that would have been his last memory of his daughter. Is that what America's come to? Is that what we are? Pretty much anywhere you go now, you have it in the back of your mind. Someone can have a gun, someone can start shooting. Do we want to live this way in America? If you talk to the gun lobby and the special interest groups that manufacture the guns and want to sell more and more, they'll say the solution is to arm more good guys with guns so they can shoot the bad guys. That's a solution they like because it sells more guns. But why wouldn't we try in the first place to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys? The Supreme Court has said there's no constitutional problem in the provision that I read with keeping guns away from felons, domestic violence abusers, the mentally unstable, and other dangerous people. The Supreme Court across the street said that's completely consistent with the Second Amendment. Why don't we do it? If our country did a better job of preventing bad guys from getting guns, there are a lot of innocent people who'd still be here today. I held a hearing in my Constitution Subcommittee a couple of years ago on gun violence. We talked about the need for better laws to stop illegal straw purchases and gun trafficking. One of our witnesses, a young woman who's become my friend, was Sandra Wortham of Chicago. Her brother Thomas was a Chicago police officer. He'd served 2 tours of duty in Iraq. He was a great guy. He was gunned down in front of his parents' home on the south side of Chicago. He was murdered by gang members with a straw purchase gun. He was an extraordinary police officer. And when he was shot, he had a gun on him. He shot back at the armed gunmen who were trying to rob him, and so did his father, who was standing nearby, also a retired police sergeant. But Officer Wortham was killed. He died in front of his parents' house on May 19, 2010. I attended his funeral. Thomas Wortham's sister, Sandra, spoke at that hearing. It was powerful, and this is what she said. "My brother carried a gun. My father carried a gun. But the fact that my brother and father were armed that night did not prevent my brother from being killed. We need to do more to keep guns out of the wrong hands in the first place. I don't think that makes us anti-gun. I think it makes us pro-decent, law-abiding people." Sandra Wortham is right, and I hope my colleagues will hear her words. Some say it's impossible to stop bad guys from getting guns. They're just going to get them. And it's true. There are a lot of loopholes in the law today, like the gun show loophole and the internet loopholes in the background check system. I don't question the possibility that those loopholes are there. It's also true the gun lobby is working hard every day to further weaken the laws on the books or to strike them down in court. But we can stop the gun lobby from gutting the laws on the books, and we can close those loopholes if lawmakers just have the courage and political will. Our goal should be to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys, not to take them away from people who use them in a responsible and legal way. I grew up in downstate Illinois. Owning shotguns and rifles is just part of life. Taking your son, or in some cases even your daughter, out hunting, it's normal. It's what people do. I've been out hunting myself in Arkansas with my former colleague, Mark Pryor, Stuttgart, Arkansas, duck hunting with him. We had a good time. And everybody there knew that that gun was a dangerous weapon that had to be handled carefully, filed the necessary permits, licenses to be out there and hunting on that day, followed a long list of requirements that limited our right to go shooting ducks, migrating ducks in that area. We did it because it was the law, and law-abiding people pay attention to the law. But what are we going to do now to respect those law-abiding people, but still get serious about stopping these guns that end up in the hands of felons and mentally unstable people? Are we going to shrug our shoulders? Are members of Congress going to put out the standard press release after a mass shooting? Or are we going to rise to this challenge and this occasion and do something? What a breakthrough it would be if we could save these innocent lives. I cannot imagine in that classroom in that community college in Oregon when that crazy gunman, loaded and armed, went up to each of those students and asked if they were Christians. And if they said yes, he told them, "You're on your way to heaven," and shot them dead. I cannot imagine that moment. I certainly can't imagine if in that classroom was someone I loved, someone I knew, someone I cared about, and they were the victims of that kind of mental instability. So, are we going to shrug our shoulders, remember the victims in our thoughts and prayers, and do nothing? Is that what it has come to? We're better than that. We can easily pass laws to protect domestic violence victims by keeping the guns out of the hands of their abusers. All it takes is will. We can easily hold gun dealers accountable for guns that they purposely misplace into the hands of criminals. All it takes is the will. We can easily adopt technology to stop criminals from stealing guns and stop kids from using them accidentally. All it takes is will. We can easily create a better background check system and pass better laws to stop straw purchasing and illegal gun trafficking. All it takes is will. We can stop the gun lobby from gutting the laws on the books, and we can close these loopholes if lawmakers just have the courage and the political will. As President Obama said, our thoughts and prayers are not enough. Stopping this violence requires courage and political will. I hope the United States Congress can rise to this challenge. I'm not giving up. I've seen too many lives cut short, too many families and communities devastated by this violence. I'm going to do all I can to bring down the number of shootings in America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.